Hey guys, and welcome back. So let's talk about slap or thump bass. Don't just slap, make it groove. Stay tuned. Hey guys, it's Jermaine Morgan. I wanted to talk to you today about slapping, more importantly, grooving when we slap, because I know a lot of people are very interested in the idea of playing slap bass or thump bass or whatever you want to call it. I know it's several names for it, but I wanted to talk today about looking at 3 ways that we can better groove with our slap and not just be all over the place when we're doing our slap technique. So point number 1, lock with the bass drum. Many of you guys have heard this before, and if you've been at more than one of my lessons, you know I'm really key on this, locking with the bass drum, especially when you're playing something that's more rhythmic. What you don't want to have happen, you don't want to sound like you're competing with what the drummer is doing, because you guys make up the foundation for the band. And I know some of you guys may know this information, but I'm aware that there's a few of you who don't know this information. Maybe because of culture, you haven't been exposed to different styles of music and that kind of thing, but one of the key things in playing slap or just grooving in general is trying to lock with the drummer. Now that does not necessarily mean you have to play every single note that the drummer is playing, but for the most part you want to lock with that core foundation of what's going on. Let's take this track here, for example, that you heard me playing earlier. So let's analyze and listen to what's happening first before I jump in, and I want you to pay close attention to what the drummer is doing. So the core, I mean, there's a couple of different rhythms that's changing in there, but the core of it, boom, 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 boom. So that's the rhythm. So it's giving me my foundation of where I need to be as far as my rhythm part of my slapping or my thumping. My rhythm part, where it needs to fall. It needs to fall somewhere along those lines. So right off the top, we're in the key of E, bass player's favorite groove key. Okay, and so this is like more dominant sounding. Right off the bat, as I start getting together what I'm gonna play for this groove, I'm again listening to the bass drum, especially when I'm thinking about thumping. I'm thinking about what my thumb is doing. So everything is gonna be built around that. And everything else I play around that is just kind of like in between notes. It's still part of the groove, but this is the foundation. It doesn't have to be that open E, but just that groove with my thumb. For the main reason, one of the biggest things about groove is establishing some type of recognizable pattern. Now, what you do around that pattern is totally up to you. You're not restricted to only playing that, but having some type of foundation is the epitome of groove, having some sense of foundation that continues to carry the song, just like the melody carries the song. That groove, that repetitive pattern going throughout the song is the thing that continues to carry it. See, there you can tell what the drum should be doing without the track, without anything playing. I'm giving you what the groove should be, so you should be able to do that with your bass. If you're playing a groove, people should understand what that groove is, whether you have a drummer or not, just by what you're doing, especially if you're going to be slapping. Point number 2, leave space. I know the tendency, especially once we start slapping and we learn a few techniques, we learn a double thumb and all these different triplets, we want to add it all in the song, but sometimes it's just important when we're developing groove to leave space. Let the song breathe. As important as you think all the extra stuff is, the space that you leave is equally important because it lets the groove settle. It lets the groove breathe. So listen in context again. Now, am I saying you're restricted to that throughout the entire song? No, you're not restricted to that, but you have to make sure that we're not all over the place, because bass players, once we learn a few licks or we learn a few chops or a few techniques, we have the tendency to put that all over the song. Sometimes it's cool, but depending on the groove, depending on the song, it can become overbearing and it can take away. And the ultimate goal when we're grooving is not to take away from the groove. We want to make sure that we keep that groove moving. Now, we can add some tasteful stuff here and there, but the ultimate thing is we want to leave that space. Play that groove, make it feel good even with that slap. Nothing. And in essence, what we want to do, we want to leave a little room for the imagination to continue to carry the groove, as well as not get in the way of anything else rhythmically that's happening in the track or with the band. Because if you ever play on a recording, a lot of times the producer will tell you less is more. Any of you experienced players out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the key when you're playing on a professional level. Less is more. Now, it sounds good live, and when you're doing a lot of stuff out and you know you're a solo act or you're somebody who's playing for a really hype situation, it sounds good to have all that stuff live. But what carries the song even more is the space that you leave and allowing people the opportunity to bump and just enjoy the groove. So that's point number 2. And the last thing I want to leave you with, point number 3, is subdivide. Now, one way of looking at that, as we start adding stuff here and there throughout the groove, we want to think of ways to subdivide, to not play everything always on the downbeat. So a way of thinking about it, some of you guys already know this, but counting the groove out. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and And instead of putting everything on the down or on the 1, we can move it to the So 1 E and a 2 E and up. You know what I'm saying? 1 E and a 2 E and 3 E and a 4 E and Putting it on the upbeat. So I put that on the on the and the 2 E and the 3 E and What that does, it kind of allows me to move around the groove without getting in anybody else's way, because a lot of times almost everybody is thinking about playing on the downbeat. That's where everybody's thinking about putting something or, you know, crashing on the 1 or on the numbers that are on the bar. But if we get in between those numbers and sneak some stuff in every now and again, we can get away with doing a little bit more. Even though we're still doing less, we can get away with doing a little bit more there, and it still doesn't take away from the groove. I'll demonstrate in context. Everything obviously doesn't have to land on the but being able to subdivide and finding some of those other syllables in the 1 E and 2 E and like picking out some of those other syllables to land the things that you're going to do. Now, here's the thing, guys, as you become more comfortable with that, as you learn how to create more space and do these 3 things that we've talked about today, you'll start learning how you can get away with doing a little bit more, because now you are developing better placement and you have a better feel of where things go. So a lot of your favorite players you hear that are so funky and they can get away with doing a lot of the things in the grooves that seem to be busy to us. It's just they have great placement. They know where to put things without getting in the way. And once you kind of learn a better idea of placement, it helps you groove. There are several bass players that you can listen to. One in particular, Ethan Farmer, is an amazing bass player, especially when it comes to slapping, thumping, and grooving, and just knowing how to add stuff in the groove without taking away from the actual groove. And that's just learning good placement, learning what works, and it's a bunch of trial and error. So don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. Just remember these 3 things. Lock with the bass drum, leave a little space, and remember to subdivide, and you should be fine. So check it out, guys. These are just 3 things I wanted to share with you on this topic today. If you'd like to continue in this lesson along with my monthly members, I encourage you to follow the link in the description below. Oh yeah, and if you want to practice this backing track, I have uploaded it to YouTube along with some other backing tracks that I've been uploading for you guys to practice to and rock out as long as you want to. So I will link it to this video, and also be sure to check the description out and have fun, guys. I'll see you next week. I'm out. Peace.